Welcome everyone to another episode of Origins, a Creative Journey. We are stoked to have on the show today, 8 p.m. Welcome.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Glad you are here as well. Thank you. And I will ask you if you could share with us your origin story. Tell us about your creative journey that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'll start things off like I'm sure every artist starts things off, started early in life. I enjoyed drawing as a child, and my parents were, very enamored by it because A, it often kept me out of trouble and well behaved in restaurants. And B, there was no one else in the family, even to this day, on either side, that is an artist. So it seemed to be uncharted territory that was exciting early on, but then a bit concerning once I got older, mainly because I was not great in school at any level. When I decided I wanted to attend art college, my parents were 100% supportive, but very much on pins and needles because, again, uncharted territory. And they weren't sure if this was a solid path to becoming a successful adult, the whole starving artist mindset. And to be fair, I mean, for many, it wasn't a good path. I think the majority of people coming out of art school are not successful in a traditional or monetary sense. And I think that also to be a successful artist, you don't even need higher education to begin with. So, I mean, that was what my parents cared about at the end of the day. And so I was Saturday morning cartoon kid in middle school and high school. I was very much into anime club and everything. And so I wanted to study animation. I attended the Minneapolis College of Art and Design and got my BFA in animation with a focus in filmmaking. And I got my first job out of college as an in-betweener. Quickly realized that is not what I wanted to do with my life. I'll go ahead and say I wasn't great at it, but also I just didn't find the passion in it. Just didn't feel like I was being fulfilled completely as an artist, mainly because the aspect of design was missing. And so I pivoted to motion design, which was a perfect fit because, I got to do a lot of traditional graphic design and character design and things like that. And so my beginning careers as a motion designer was very interesting time in technology because, the first iPhone had launched after I graduated college. So that was a very interesting time to be doing art and design because there wasn't anything established from, the user experience or communication side of things. And so I have this distinct memory huddled around this new iPhone talking about how clean and thoughtful the animations on the interface were. And one of my colleagues at the time, who is a close friend of mine at this point, said something that always kind of stuck with me was we were looking at it and he was like, dude, this is the future. Like they're going to need us someday. Like they're going to need motion designers to think through this. Look, things are moving everywhere. And that moment was a mental shift for me creatively. This was probably career wise my Bruce Lee moment of becoming the teapot. And so after I put about 6 years into the world of broadcast and film, I made the jump into UX design and have been working in tech for the last decade or so.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's such a fascinating journey. And it totally makes sense of going from animation to motion design, then to UX. Could you tell us a little bit more about how 8 p.m. as a brand got started and what you've developed with Jimmy and all of the other things you're up to?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was about my fifth year in the tech industry that I realized that my skill as a traditional artist had atrophied. I wanted to get back into drawing specifically. I started posting my sketches on Instagram right around 2018, and that was kind of the beginning for me as 8 p.m. I started building an audience, and that went well enough to start thinking about selling my artwork. My wife and I were browsing Japantown in San Francisco one weekend, and we had come across a group of artists selling their artwork. And so I asked one of the people tabling what, the whole thing was about. And it just so happened to be one of the showrunners. So I got invited to sign up. And it's a monthly event called Mini Art Mart, where Japanese inspired artists sign up for a table to sell their artwork for the weekend. And I thought, hey, this seems fun. I'm going to try it out. And that was the floodgate into doing larger conventions and ultimately DesignerCon and the toy industry. So, I did that for a number of years, attended DesignerCon, Ben, Kevin, they were nice enough to let me in, even though I wasn't a toy designer, had nothing that even resembled a toy. It was just purely screen prints, fan art, dark art, all that kind of stuff. And whoever it was that greenlit me into the show apparently liked my artwork enough to think that I fit the mold to even be there, which was great because, I'd always wanted to design a toy. I've always been into toys, but never really landed on anything of substance in terms of like, yeah, I want to invest in kind of pushing this character specifically forward. So going back to COVID times, I got stir crazy. I started streaming on Twitch to kind of let out my craziness. Attempted to get artwork done on stream. That went well some days. That did not go well some other days where we were just up to complete nonsense because we were all just kind of trapped inside. But there was this little character I had drawn years ago that I named Jimmy. And I was just a little skull boy with a birthday hat. And the whole, idea behind him was that everyone forgot his birthday and he's just sitting at the end of the table still waiting for people to show up to his birthday party. And I thought it was a perfect character to, put little different hats on. Because, I had initially drawn him with a birthday hat and I was like, it'll be really fun to just put different hats on this little skull boy. So when I started doing Twitch, there are these things called channel point redemptions for anyone listening that doesn't go on Twitch or understand how the paradigm works, but you gain channel points as you watch creators over time. And as you garner the points, you can use them to purchase rewards that are set by the creator. So one of the rewards that I had set was to draw a hat on Jimmy. So at any given point when you gained, 10,000 channel points, you could say, hey, I want you to draw a hat on Jimmy and I want it to be this hat. So over a year and a half, I had hundreds of these hats. And so as I started doing it, I was like, oh man, maybe this is the right platform. Maybe this is the right space. Like I love this character. It's mine. It's my little mascot. He has all these little hats and, they could possibly be blind boxes or something of that nature. And people could purchase this little character and then be able to put on different hats as they purchase different blind boxed hats. And then the hats could also exist independently from Jimmy. They don't necessarily have to go on top of him. So I was like, oh, this is it. This is the idea. So I kind of went to the drawing board and decided to fill out the rest of who Jimmy was because he was just a bust. He was just a head with a rib cage. And now, flash to a full-on character that is out in the public and a bunch of different colorways, a bunch of different ideas, a bunch of different collaborators. And it's crazy to think that, looking back, it's been more or less 4 or 5 years in the making to finally get this thing launched, which is a crazy thought. And I can also get into some of the craziness in terms of the difficulties and the trials and tribulations of designing and getting a toy manufactured to begin with.
That's actually was going to be where I was going to force you, eight. But I want to hit on this stuff first for people listening, because I love this whole beginning story of yours. Here's parents that got to support it, but they're worried, right? And we've talked to many people about this. Like, why don't you be a professional football player? Yeah, that's harder than an artist, but people don't realize it, right? Then you get into animation, and I can so relate to this because I worked the Mousewitz. You're like, okay, great. Oh my God, this is the most boring thing in the world, right? And you're like, I got this creative juice. I got to get it out. And you keep moving. And go back to Bruce Lee, the water statement and being the teapot. And you're just kind of flowing with it. And things are just naturally happening because you're this creative person. What are the difficulties that came along that let you, okay, I need to change my shape. I need to be this. I need to do this. I would love to hear the challenges because a lot of people don't talk about those. They always want to talk about the successes. But if you ever, I'm a major Bruce Lee nerd. If you listen to his philosophy, a lot of that is the challenges and how you grow from the challenges.
It's a double-edged sword at times. Being like water is great, but it is also the style of no style. That's kind of what Jeet Kune Do is all about, right? And so when it comes to that, it makes you agile and makes you malleable for whatever challenges may arise or how you may have to approach a specific problem. But then from an artist and a more importantly a brand point of view, you then have no identity if you are continually, changing shape. So it's a pro and a con that, hey, I want to give myself the skill set and the ability to adjust, but I also need to find who I am and really put a stake in that so that people know when they see my work, that's 8 p.m. You don't want people looking at art and be like, that could be anything. And that's even like, getting into AI generated art. You could even start having that conversation, that can of worms of like how that's affecting people's perception of artists and brands.
I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. What I've seen kind of looking through your work is I love Jimmy, by the way. Like, I'm so sad that your shop is sold out of the blanks because I was like, I need to paint this guy. I love this. And I love the toy design. And it has very much an urban vinyl feel. And your ink work is exquisite, but it also is like there's so much texture there while Jimmy is so clean. And so I would love to hear more about how you're kind of navigating that brand because you do a great job of branding yourself and I can tell when your work is your work. And then also Jimmy feels a little bit like it feels like you, but it also looks different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome that you mentioned that because that, goes into what we're talking about in terms of not just becoming the teapot, but then also how I've pivoted my passions between being an artist and being a designer. And it's to my detriment in a sense because I built a following on Instagram as a dark artist, a guy who just drew these like highly detailed line artwork of skulls and fan art and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden I'm dropping this crazy toy that looks nothing like my artwork. And so you alienate a certain segment of your audience when all of a sudden you pivot like that. And it's a strong pivot because it's like all of a sudden now what I'm presenting is completely different than it was, but it's all me. And it's just a different side of my work. It's more of the design side. It's really the idea of marrying that side, that artistry, that character design, the approach of how I draw and put things down on paper, and then moving that into production and manufacturing of like, how does that translate to if this was supposed to look like a vinyl toy, like what would it look like? And that was like the mindset and the different hat that I put on, pun intended, to be able to showcase like, hey, I'm not just this one thing. Here's another aspect of what I do as a creative. And after Jimmy, there may be something else. Who knows? And then it's like, why is he doing color all of a sudden? Why is he an oil painter? What is this shit? That could happen tomorrow. It could happen 5 years from now. I don't know. It's just like whatever strikes me as I want to do that next, then I'll follow that itch. Life is kind of just a list of bucket or just a bunch of bucket list stuff that I'm just trying to check off. And toys was a huge one.
That's cool. And to be clear, I don't think it's a bad thing that Jimmy doesn't look like the rest of your art, but I love what you were saying about how maybe in some ways Jimmy is the most personal piece out of them all because it is marrying that love of the darkness and the, like your huge tentacle print and then with vinyl toys and your design sensibility and kind of this, the cleaner production version. So thank you for sharing that. And I would love to know, I think a lot of people were on, I don't know what episode number we're at now, but we've gone for a while and we haven't really gotten into actual toy production. So I'd love for you to maybe share what were some of the difficulties of getting this made.
Yeah, and my perspective is from a complete amateur. Like this was my first entry into it. I knew nothing about toys or how to manufacture them or how to go about it. So maybe this is helpful for anyone listening that is in that space right now of like, hey, I'm listening to this podcast because I need to hear about somebody's, whole thing. Because I know a lot of people that have been in the industry for years and like they have so much experience. And, when you work on toys for so long and you have multiple molds done at this point and you've, matured your brand, the moments of beginning are so far away that they begin to disappear in the memory bank. versus mine are very fresh and the wounds are very fresh. Anyone that asks, "Hey, I'm looking into getting into making a toy, like do you have any advice?" I'm just like, "Get ready. Get ready for disappointment." Especially if you have, a strong sense of what it needs to be and you're not willing to make compromises. There, you will have to make a compromise at some level, and you just have to decide what hill to die on. And what I mean by that is, it took a long time to get Jimmy to the point where I felt like, yes, this is exactly what I want him to be. And that's just at the character design stage. That's just on a piece of paper. The whole can of worms is getting it prototyped, 3D modeled, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not great at 3D modeling. And so to get Jimmy looking the way I wanted it with, these clean planes, straight lines, like, what you had mentioned is very different than some of my artwork. It's like, that's the stuff that was very challenging to get right, because you have to then bring in a team of people. If you're not doing your own 3D modeling, then you're bringing in a 3D artist to do it. And then you're going to have to then clearly communicate what it should look like. They have the character sheet, which is fine, but it doesn't always come out exactly how you, and maybe even what you're providing isn't exactly what you want. You just have to kind of go back and forth. And so I tried to find somebody to do this. I then found, I won't even name them, a studio to make my prototype. I provided them the character sheets. I paid thousands of dollars, and they did a fantastic job. But it was a polystone resin prototype. It was quite a bit of money in order for them to make a limited run of these of like 100, which then put the price point really high. I started a Kickstarter. That's when it debuted at DesignerCon, and I got a bunch of people's eyes on it, and people were really excited about it. But the Kickstarter didn't happen, and the studio kind of left me high and dry in terms of like the 3D work. They're just like, this is our proprietary stuff. We can't relinquish this 3D file to you or any of the stuff, that we've done for you. Goodbye. So I was like, okay, fine. Not from what I hear is the norm, but fine. That's the way you want to run it. I'll go redo this. So it was taking my prototype that had been created and finding the right 3D artist to recreate the prototype that had already been made. So we're, it's like one step forward, two steps back type of thing. I went through multiple 3D artists. There were not tons, but a handful of 3D artists who we gave them a shot, and it was just like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not good enough is not an option. We've come too far, and I've already spent way too much money for this not to be exactly how I want it to be. So it's either going to be exactly how I want it to be, or it's not happening at all. And I had talked to also a few distributors and manufacturers, and ultimately landed with Plastic Empire. Dustin over at Plastic Empire, super cool, super collaborative, very much about the artists and empowering creatives to do their thing and elevate their ideas in their eyes. And he's kind of there to support that, not locking you into anything that you don't want to be in. So, it felt right to collab with him, and we finally got an artist to get it exactly how it should be. I'm sure that 3D artist has PTSD because of me, but it's okay because we got what we wanted. And the 3D model is absolutely amazing. That is just the part where we're just getting it ready for manufacturing. I didn't even get to that point. I've been ranting, and I didn't even get to the truly hard part, was what happens when this lands on China's lap, right? And when it goes to the factory, you have, depending on who you work with, you may have a broker, you may have, a middleman between you and the factory, or you're working with the factory directly. If you don't speak Chinese, there is a language barrier. Like all these things that even if you haven't done a toy, if you've done any type of manufacturing in China with like enamel pins or anything like that, is a lot more back and forth than you would anticipate it would be. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that. And, if you don't, it's not for the faint of heart, because if you don't have the money, if you don't have a backer or an investor who is going to help you build this out, it's a lot of risk. It is a lot of money. And so You really have to find somebody who truly believes in what you're creating and truly believes in kind of your dedication to it to get it done right in order for it to ultimately succeed. And even then, it might not. So, and then there's broad strokes. And I'll, if you guys want me to follow up on any specific stage of it, I will. But just broad strokes, it's such a long process. It's ultimately years of your life, and there's no promise that people are going to buy it. This truly has to be something you believe in and really take over your life. And I was, Twitch streaming, I was drawing, I was still doing my posters and doing all that. I had to stop. I retired from Twitch. I stopped drawing. Like I had to focus 110% on getting this toy off and running. And that's nothing to say it's not my full-time job, right? Like kind of what I kind of filled you guys in on. And I'm still doing the 9 to 5 on top of that. So it's a crazy process. It's a crazy life. And you ultimately will get some gray hairs in the process.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that has echoed what we've talked to some other toy creators around, is that like you're doing this for the love of the game more so than the money oftentimes. And would you be willing to share kind of like how long it was from you starting to take this seriously around like, oh, I need to design him as a full toy as opposed to a bust, to getting your first toy kind of like in your hands? What was that kind of time length?
That was over 3 years for easy. I think almost 4 years, 5 years from the inception of like Jimmy as a character. And that also takes into account all the supply chain issues and COVID, right? So that doesn't quite exist anymore. And so maybe things are expedited or happen a little faster now. Maybe you're looking at maybe just 1 year or 2 years if you're ready to rock. But I feel like even with the supply chain issues and COVID and all that kind of stuff, I think it still would have taken that long just because I was so picky and just everyone involved, like from, other artists who helped me get Jimmy to where he was, 3D artists, Dustin over Plastic Empire. Everyone's just like, yeah, this, they're keeping up with these stages and they're like, that looks great. And I'm like, yeah, but here are the 15 things wrong with it. And they all need to be fixed before I can give my green light. And they're like, you are absolutely insane. This is, Dustin's probably over there like, what did I get myself into working with this guy? Like, he is off the rails. But that's also why I'm very proud of where Jimmy ended up. And even today, he's not perfect. There's a lot of things that keep me up at night where I'm like, we already manufactured him and he's not perfect. Well, maybe I'll just have to redo everything. So start over. So yeah, like I get crazy with it like that. But there's already been moments where people have tried to recreate Jimmy. Like we've seen some knockoffs and it's not even close. And I'm like, and they never will be. You know why? Because anyone trying to copy that thing is going to be like, you know what? This is too much work. I'm just going to go ahead and copy something easier. That right there is like why I'm so proud of it, is because there is a lot to it. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of nuance to the character. There's a lot of things that I personally haven't seen in the toy industry, like with the illusion that we've created with the rib cage and the tentacle going from, the head in through all the way down to the torso. And there's just aspects that even didn't get to the final production because they were just like, that's a crazy ask. We can't do that. I'm like, I know you can. You just don't want to because it's too hard, but I'll get you someday. Like, it's like, I know that's possible. I've seen it in different, places just in a different way. But it all comes down to money. It all comes down to, well, then each toy is going to be, $30 each and we just can't afford that. It's like, all right, that's fair. That's where my compromise comes into play. So it's like, okay, well, let's get rid of that or let's do this instead. But yeah, that's, I even forget what the initial question was. I just tend to go on my rants, but, that's kind of where I land with, doing toys. And I feel like the hard part in terms of what I truly wanted to put out there to be like this represents me and I'm trying to like, make a big splash is what Jimmy is. I have a lot of things that I want to do that are much simpler that may make a lot of people involved feel a lot better. Because I don't know if I'll ever go that crazy again in terms of trying to build out a vinyl toy as complicated as Jimmy.
What I want to pull on is you mentioned you've already seen people knocking off your toy. And I know that people say imitation is the greatest form of flattery, but it also sucks because people are trying to steal your creation. But could you share how that process has been is navigating the fact that people are legit trying to steal your design and sell it like as if it was yours?
Yeah, it is flattering, and it's the name of the game. It happens to everyone. It happens to a lot more people than you would think. For every one that I catch, there's five more that I don't. And that goes for every artist. Artists who are much better than me get copied all the time. I think my point of pride, especially with my artwork, well, my artwork and Jimmy, is that when they try to copy it, it never is, in my eyes, as good. And so I'm like, well played. Chin up. Keep trying. Try again. Good luck. Insert coin. Like there's been tons of, for instance, tattoos where I've come across where I'm like, wow, that is, I did an Ava series where I did, Ava Unit 1 that kind of blew up and people were stealing it and putting it on cups and t-shirts and getting it tattooed and things like that. And it's a gray area because it's fan art. So I'm taking someone else's IP and, more or less profiting off of it because I'm selling my poster of that IP. But it's a difference between being derivative and being transformative. And that distinction becomes gray, and not everybody understands the difference. But it's also why I know right away when it's my Ava 1 because no other Ava 1 looks like my Ava 1. And that's the difference. And so when someone copies it, I'm like, I know right away that's mine and it's not as good. And so there's been a lot of times where I've had to cease and desist. I've had to, and by the way, like if someone in Japan was like, hey, cease and desist those, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. All right. All right, cool. Well played. Well, it doesn't look quite like that, but yeah, it's also that idea of, taking your artwork to the next level, especially if you're inspired or, for lack of a better term, copying something that exists to truly just make it your own and make it, pride yourself on the work you put in to make it your own so that it stands out as yours. And even one more level to make it so difficult to do that no one else can do it or do it as well as you. There's a lot of tattoos out there where I'm like, oof, should have had me do it. I've never tattooed in my life, but I probably could have done it better because I'm the guy who made that. Like you missed that little detail and that one, and oh no, that's not the right line weight. So you have to take that attitude when people steal your work and copy your work because you will be miserable the rest of your life, especially if you're a hardworking artist who is making really cool things that are inspiring people. People will inevitably steal it. And if you don't have that attitude of being flattered by it and being proud that people are doing it, then it's rough and it's hurtful. And it's especially hurtful when there's companies out there that are stealing it and profiting. I see that quite a bit. It's one thing for another artist to be like, I'm just going to copy this and then say it's mine. That happened to me way back in high school. Like, lost my sketchbook in the parking lot one day, and I was like, "Well, that's done." And about a week or two later, it was delivered to the front office, and I got called up, and they're like, "Yep, some girls said that this was dropped, and their friend had taken it and whatever, but they stole it back from her or whatever." And that was a whole story. And I was like, "What the hell? What do they mean?" So I open up my sketchbook, and there's like a note about it, and they're like, "Hey, our friend found this in the parking lot and erased your," because it's all pencil sketches, mainly use pencil, "erased your signature on everything and replace it with her signature. So we're really sorry." And like, yeah, every page that I signed was this other person's signature. And she was like slinging it around like it was her sketchbook and she had done it. And I was like, that is so dope. Like, I wasn't even mad. I was like, that's so cool. Like, someone would want to pose as me because they deemed it valuable and they deemed it impressive enough to tell people that it was theirs. And so I still to this day have that sketchbook. I haven't changed it. It's still, the note is still clipped in there, and it's like one of my prized possessions. And it would just be another sketchbook that collected dust and would have been thrown under the bed had that not happened. So you got to find the silver lining in those moments that are otherwise shameful.
Hey, that's a freaking awesome story, by the way. And I love the fact that our friends, like to me, you're not my friend. You're like, I question their friendship there. But it leads my brain to go down a path. And we were talking about before about AI art, and you were mentioning before, and I just have to jump to it. It's kind of, you started kind of hitting what the gray area to a lot of us artists is on this whole AI controversy.
That was actually kind of where I was going with it as well. And I was like, I should probably stop ranting and take a breath. And because that was the segue into that, right? Is, hey, going back to that, this is how this has spiraled out of control. Like that mindset of like, this is okay has now then transformed into AI generative art is okay. Like I see this a lot on Instagram and even like in my explore page where I'm like, yo, that is dope. Damn it, that's AI. Son of a bitch. Like,
Amen.
right? And I'm just like, and I'll go to I'm like, well, let me see it. Like, this is still inspiring. Like, subjectively, to me, it's still inspiring. I'm like, oh, that's dope. I'm gonna save that. Like, that's a really cool like idea. Like, I want to do something with that as well. So I have like a bunch of artists who inspire me, who I save their stuff, and I'm like, oh, I really like that. Like, how do I, do something like that because I really like that, or I want to learn how to do that. When I click on these AI generative art accounts, they sometimes are listed in the bio as like everything posted is mine. And I'm like, no, this is owned by hundreds of artists who put in thousands of hours of work to build the skill set to be able to create a piece of work that is then part of this generator that then creates this work for you in a matter of seconds. You've done absolutely fuck all. Like you've done nothing. You own nothing. Like so I have very little respect for it. I do see how it can be beneficial, right? For, certain aspects of not just art, but the industry and being able to be really fast and really agile to get ideas out by just like hitting a prompt and doing it. But that being said, it then has to be very similar to what happened in the music industry, right? Like if I'm allowing my artwork to be part of this generator, every time you generate my artwork, I'm getting paid. Like that's how this has to work. And that's not how it currently works right now. And so once and I'm hoping we get there, because once that goes into effect, and there'll always be, I mean, even music artists are dealing with this. We're like, I got pennies on the dollar. It's fucking bullshit. But it's a step toward the right direction of at least acknowledging who the original creator is and the work that they put in to make your life easier.
A freaking man on everything you said. And to pull the string a little bit more on the music stuff, years in the music industry. The other part I loved on that, if you could do the same thing, is I'll use Dr. Dre as an example. You can go through Dr. Dre stuff. One of my favorite artists. You can look at, and then you can read his liner notes and you can see who he sampled from, right? And then that expands your, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that person. And you go find those other musics. If we did this with art, it would allow other artists to find other artists for more inspiration. Is one of the positive aspects of it. So totally 100% out of my question on this. At work, there's a guy at my office who's Chris, look at the art I created. He's a programmer. I'm like, dude, you didn't create that. You opened Discord, said a few lines, and that's not creating art. He goes, but you use it too. I go, okay, here's the difference. I put the line in. It inspires me. I couldn't figure out how to do a perspective or a city. And then I don't look at it again. Like it's that tool. Have you used it, AI art, and have you used it that way or anything on it yourself? Just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a subscription to Midjourney and I've used it at work to quickly. So for instance, if we're like, hey, we want, this element and we want it to be like super high 3D, like gold gloss or whatever it is. I'm like, well, that would take me weeks to do. and we're just looking for a mood board or like a representation of like, does it work in our system or not? I'll just pump that into Midjourney and be like, here's what it is. Here's what that would look like. That's where it's super helpful. When it comes to like, okay, now we need to make this. Now I sit down from scratch and I make it. Like that's how Gen AI should work. Not like, hey, I generated this and now we go use it and we profit off of it. That's where it becomes an issue.
I really appreciate that, Eight, because I think that oftentimes on social media, especially, the divide between AI artists and non-AI artists, it's so vitriolic and there's no nuance of like, oh, these are the ethical use cases, understanding ownership, understanding copyright. Like none of that often gets talked about. And it's either the AI artists are like, I want to express myself, screw you, artists. Artists are like, you're taking away my job, screw you, poser. And then there's like no nuance or any sort of thoughtful communication about the two. So I really appreciate you diving into what I think is a very polarizing topic and bringing this level of nuance of there is a place for it, but it's also not to do finished pieces and sell giant prints of your AI art that you didn't make.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like the technology is moving faster in on the route of we cannot tell that it's AI faster than it's moving down the route of how do we wrangle this in to give the right artist the right recommend or the right recognition for this generative piece of art to be made. It would be nice if, these Gen AI accounts were posting stuff and then there was a list of like, here are all the artists that it put together to compile to make this one piece of thing. And it's like, oh, okay, now I can click through this and see the artists like, oh yeah, this is the style that it's kind of grabbing off of. And I want to see more of this artist. I don't want to see more of what Midjourney can do. I want to see more of what this human can do because that's what it aggregated. And maybe that's just me. A lot of people, and why we run into this issue is a lot of people just don't give a shit. They don't care. It's like, well, it doesn't matter to me. And there's no pride in it because they're not artists themselves. And I get that, but it's not okay objectively. So, but I understand where that mindset is coming from.
I totally love your perspective on that. And to prove your point, I work with the Anaheim Art Association and our gallery stuff. And we've had people submit AI art and they come to me because I'm the techie and they're like, Chris, is this AI art? Yes. And they're like, how do you know? Like, it's so hard to start doing it because we don't want those people. And two, the other negative side of this all is I'm a digital artist. So now people are going, oh, galleries, you're a digital artist. I don't want you. No, I literally do everything from scratch. Our society hasn't caught on fast enough. Now, if you go back in time, sorry for the long thing, I think we're at the next apex for art. This happened with photography. Like, remember, it was, rich people faving for paintings, people painting landscapes because we didn't have cameras. Cameras come and that whole art world diminishes and then we get impressionist art, right? And we get the next evolution of art. So now play with me. I'm going to throw a weird one out to you. And the reason I ask this is you've been so impressive to me of your mindset and how you look at things. We're at the next evolution of art. What do you think the next evolution of art is for us artists going forward?
I think that's why Gen AI is so scary because it seems like the next stage is removing us from the equation. And that's why a lot of artists are just very much on their toes and concerned about like, what does this mean long term? I would say that, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. So it comes down to, and this is like with way too many things in my life, in my professional career, it comes down to accountability. And there's a lack of that in society. There's a lack of accountability. So we need to come back to that. But like I said, the cat is out of the bag. So Gen AI is on the run and it's going to be its thing and it's going to improve and it's going to become its thing. But for example, Godzilla -1 minus color came out. They did a black and white version and it's like, yo, that's awesome. So there's a throwback. There is an appreciation from where we came from or like how art was represented with the lack of technology. And that's always going to be there. And that will always be a circle and a cycle. that happens with art that, hey, there is going to always be a profound appreciation for humans who do this by hand. And again, like that's going to be cycled on like how much that is in kind of the mainstream of appreciation or importance or of value. But it just, yeah, it's a lot of unknown. But I do think for me as an artist, I look back at, like you had mentioned, the people who had done it before us and the technologies that they said, oh, analog horror. That's another aspect. Like I love analog horror. The fact that it's like VHS, like RGB, like, static, like that stuff is beautiful. And it wasn't thought of as artistic or beautiful at the time because it was just the current standard of technology. But now looking back on it, you have this new perspective or appreciation for it. And that's my hope that that's where things go with what we do with our hands.
I love that so much. I agree with you. I think that so much of where we're going to be going is focusing on that story about what it means to create as a human being and that narrative around this is my craft, this is the stories I'm trying to tell, this is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's very much in alignment with what you're seeing. So I want to get back to you and your art. This has been fabulous. And I want to do like, oh, we should just do an AI show. And maybe we will, and we'll have you on that. But I want to talk more about you and your story. And so can you maybe share with us like where are you at now and like what are there and kind of like where are you in terms of moving forward with Jimmy, moving forward with your brand? Like how are you thinking about the future yourself?
Jimmy is something that is near and dear to my heart. In many respects, I am Jimmy. There's been a few people that are like, hey, are you Jimmy? I'm like, sure. It's like the same as like, should I call you Sean or should I call you 8 p.m. or should I call you Jimmy? I'm like, I guess all of the above. They're all me. The future of Jimmy really depends on kind of the reception and the support behind Jimmy because the checkbox of making Jimmy a reality. And then I have a dozen more checkboxes that are like, tabbed under that main bullet. So they may not happen depending on the reception or the investment or, lack of. But there's a lot of stuff in the future if it takes off and people want it. So Jimmy is very much a personal passion thing where it's like, okay, this is very much mine. Everything that comes under that I would release in the future is very much part of the overall lore that I've built, which is like super secret of who is Jimmy, where does Jimmy come from, his origins. We can have Jimmy on the podcast for his origins one day. But like, who are the main antagonists? Who are his friends? Who are, where does he live? I touch upon these things and I hint these things with my Discord, even out in the public, and people don't, 99% of the time, people don't even know it's a hint. It's really for me, I'm just like, they don't even know. They didn't catch it, which is great. I'm not going to call it out, but it's out there. Someone will connect the dots someday, hopefully, or they'll just all disappear and it's okay because I'm entertained by it. So it's very like, self-centered, but it has to be with your artwork in a sense. Like you have to be doing it for yourself first and foremost before anybody can. And if you are passionate about it and you are proud of it, that comes off. And then people then feel confident about rallying behind it and feeling the same way about it. And that's kind of how I've approached Jimmy. And so anything that is launched after this is very much for the community as well as me. And so we'll see if those things happen. I hope they do. And I hope that maybe things change even if I don't have the support or backing. I have the financials to be like, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just going to make this. Where's that phone number to that Chinese factory we used? And then they'll tell me the minimum. And I go, okay, never mind. You know what? I'd rather just spend that money on Taco Bell and play some Call of Duty, I guess. But, that's also the challenge is finding that consistency and that balance of knowing when to work hard because you can't always work hard. You try to do that, you burn out. And if you burn out at the wrong time, the thing you always wanted to do never happens.
Hey, man, that was beautiful advice. And I just love that because I've ended up in the hospital because of my burnout. And we all have. You keep hitting on these things through the conversation that I'm loving. Like, you do it for yourself and you got to stay true to yourself. And you started your Instagram with this type, and then I'm going to put Jimmy up and people left. And you've stayed true to you, true to Sean, and Jimmy. And during this, you've built an amazing brand around it. Has it been by accident, on purpose, which I probably know the answer to? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on Eight's brand and how you built it and how you see more of it going. Because it's fabulous. Mad props, baby. Mad props.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's calculated chaos. It's absolutely calculated chaos because I very much dance the line between really getting my ducks in a row and fuck it, we'll do it live. It's really just kind of feeling it out day by day. And this is a conversation I've had a lot with a good friend and a fellow partner of mine who him and I behind the scenes are trying to launch a podcast about, monsters and pop culture and artwork and animation. He's an incredible artist. Amazing. And he is very much like a different side of the spectrum of like, this needs to be a process. This is a pipeline. We need to kind of get this in the calendar and we need to make sure we know what we're talking about. And I'm like, hey man, c'est la vie. Like, let's just do it. I don't know what's going to happen. Hit record and see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. He's like, but what if we say something we're not supposed to? I'm like, even better. So there's that side of it of just like, let's just be chaotic and see what comes of it. Because I learned that doing Twitch, where it's like where it ended up and the characters I came up with and all the inside jokes and what I decided to draw, like that all came from my environment. That all was a reaction to what was happening live. And none of that would have happened if I had then set a strict process of like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit record and this is going to happen. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. I just hit record and I'm like, let's see what happens. When I stop recording, I go, damn, I had no idea it was going to be that kind of night. And I love that chaos. And I never would have landed on a lot of things I've done as an artist had I not been comfortable in that chaos. That being said, you can let that run wild and go rampant, and then you become aimless, and then you actually have nothing to show for it because you've never really riled it in and reined it in to become something cohesive. So it's definitely a balance, and it's one of the things that I'm always trying to work on is balance, and I am failing at that. I am losing miserably at balance because I am a fat, lazy piece of shit. I am just, always struggling to find balance, but I think that's kind of the meaning of life, is just finding your balance. So I also don't let it frustrate me too much because I'm like, well, that's kind of what this journey is about. It's about balance.
I love that notion of balance being a really important goal, but also having the flexibility to know that maybe perfect balance is never going to be something that you achieve, right? We can strive for it, but also being happy and okay on our process towards that. And I think that's the sense I'm really getting from you. I'd love to know for maybe other creatives who also are struggling with balance. I know I am. I know most of us are. Chris just raised his hand. What advice would you give to creatives trying to find more balance? And I would even maybe specify as the person who is balanced the opposite way of no creation, right? Where they're like, I have my 9 to 5. This is how I pay my bills. I'm tired when I come home from work. I don't want to paint. Like, how might someone like that find more balance in their life?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest questions to ask anybody, even outside of an artist. One thing that I try to do to set myself up for success is to always attempt, at least to make my own luck, by positioning myself at that intersection of preparation and opportunity. So I try to do enough to set up myself to respond to certain things that may come up out of my control. That way things don't go completely out of balance, right? Like we're always teetering. If you're doing the right things to set yourself up to be at that intersection, things tend to not go haywire. There'll always be those curveballs that exist, and it doesn't always work out. And I'm rather an emotional person, but I'm still very calculated at my approach in life. So getting through the hard parts is, just positioning myself to be able to handle it. And that's the most important part. The balance of, hey, like I'm coming back from my 9 to 5 and I don't want to do this other stuff is something I deal with all the time. I procrastinate more than I would like to. Maybe a lot of people would say that. Maybe it's inherent to creatives, but I need it. I actually need at times to procrastinate because I'm like, I need to come up to that deadline. I need to hit the wall to be like, now I have to do it. Right. And so there's also that side of it where it's like I'm forcing myself to be under stress in order to get this done. And that's not really putting myself at the intersection. So that in itself of like how you approach your preparation is a balance. Either you're ready to rock and you want to get a good head start on things, or you need external forces to push you to elevate those stressors to actually get the work done. Consistency is another thing. So balance and consistency are always very difficult for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people. So especially if you're putting out content that has an audience, they consciously or subconsciously expect something on a regular cadence. So the hard answer for some is that too bad. You got to sit down and you got to make that. I know we're all tired. It's 5 p.m. and we come home and we got to do all these other things. You got to take care of the kids. You got to make dinner. You got to, do the laundry or whatever. All right. Either you do that after you do this thing or you do it before, but it has to get done. And if it doesn't, then maybe you reevaluate how important or how valuable this thing that you've been trying to build really is to you. And a lot of things fall by the wayside that probably shouldn't, right? And that's, again, back to the balance is like, right now I got way too much laundry to do. But like some of those things just like fall by the wayside because it's like, well, you know what? Like that is important to do, but I need to do this thing like for Jimmy, right? Like Valentine's Day colorway has launched actually this weekend coming up. I'm dating this podcast now. So, it's a MegaCon exclusive, but I also want to put together some content on social media for Valentine's Day. That has a hard deadline. That has to be done. So something else has to give. Not everything can be done. And understanding that and just constantly being aware of your priorities and making sure that, you're keeping track of things and people, your significant other or your family or your friends, those relationships are incredibly important. And so making sure that you're also keeping that aligned and not, dropping the ball on all those other things is important. So
You're making me, I think it's Henry Mancini, but it's one of those kind of composers who has my favorite quote. The person asked, how do you create such beautiful music? He's like, deadlines. Like, I don't have enough time and I have a deadline. That And I love the advice you gave. But I want to shift gears a little because you mentioned you're a Monster fan, and as you can tell, just a nut for it. And so is Rick. I would love to delve into some of your favorite movies, TVs, whatever, and some of those that like influenced you. Like, for example, if you look at my stuff, you'll never guess it. The Golden Voyage of Sinbad is my biggest influence on my life. So I give you the floor, my friend. Well, not biggest, but things you love and influences.
What got me into art college, I think the main catalyst was just my love for anime and Japanese culture in general. That changed once I got into college, where I got into the film aspect of things and started really getting inspired by film and movies. Not to go through the entire timeline, but even today, like now that I have a toy that I'm slinging, I am incredibly inspired by other toy designers and kind of what they're doing. So it changes depending on kind of what I'm doing at the moment. It's never just the one thing, but the one thing that is always constant is being inspired by the ones around me. that's always going to be the thing for anyone, is your constant is always going to be your friends, your family. I gave an interview, man, almost 15 years ago. I had done my senior animation and made the rounds at various film festivals, and I was asked a similar question, like, who are your main influences and stuff like that. And my answer has never changed. It's like my fellow friends and artists who are around me, because they're always the constant, because they always inspire me in different ways, because them too are changing. They too are ever changing. So they may inspire me with what they're doing or what they're saying one year, and then 15 years later, they're doing something completely different and they're inspiring me in a different way. So that's always something I'm excited about. That's why relationships are very important. That's why collabing is very important, because Evangelion is one of my favorite animes of all time. It is always just Evangelion. How I perceive it may be different as time goes on, but that is locked into what it is. And how it inspires me is different, but that's internal. That's not external.
Hey, this has been a fabulous conversation that I wish could go on forever. But for time's sake, I would love it if you could share with our listeners, where is the best way for people to find you and all of the awesome stuff that you're up to?
You can find me on the8pm.com. If you want to follow me on any various socials, it's at the bottom of my webpage. But Instagram is usually where I'm most active. It's 8_PM. Join the Discord. That's where you're always going to find exclusives and the first to know about upcoming colorways. And I always give some extra goodies to the Discord community. So definitely come through if you're interested in what I'm doing.
And how we always like to end the show is 8. We always give our guests the final word.
It's a very hot take that I was thinking about as you were asking me, advice to inspire creatives. I am not one who subscribes to the idea that anyone can be a creative. I think, depending on the circumstance, everyone can be creative, but not a creative. And, if everybody is creative, then no one is creative. So I think it's important to make that distinction. Everyone drives a car, but very few are race car drivers. So I think being creative can be learned. But it's not bestowed upon you. If you paint a pretty picture on the weekend with a bottle of wine, you can't call yourself an artist. Like, it's consistency, right? It's dedication that makes you a creative. And I think that mindset over time, that lax idea of like, oh, anybody can be a creative, mutates into this thinking that it's okay to pay real creatives with exposure. It's okay to do pro bono work. And it's not. Miss me with that shit, right? Stop doing uninspiring work for free. It undermines all of us. And so that's me on my soapbox about, if I'm to inspire creatives or give that kind of advice, is to know your worth, just like anything else in life. Go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it is hard.
Thank you for joining Rick and myself on another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a Designer Con production. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download and listen to us every place you get your favorite podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Origins Creative Journey, all one word. Drop us an email for thoughts, ideas, or maybe somebody you'd like us to interview at dconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you join us in Las Vegas for DesignerCon, North America's premier annual design convention. All the information can be found, including tickets, at designercon.com. Till then, enjoy your own creative journey.